This parable we hear today is often called the parable of the prodigal son. Prodigal referring to his excessive wastefulness. He's just pouring out of all the things, the squandering of his property. The son who took his inheritance from his father, essentially telling his father, you're no good to me. Just give me what's coming to me when you die, because you're basically dead to me, and I'm going out on my own way. But more properly, this parable is more properly called the parable of two sons. Because while we often focus on the first son, that second son, the older son, is also a very important piece. Because while the first son, the younger son, tells his father that he's dead to him, and he goes out and lives wildly and squanders his life, the second son, who stays with him, strangely, while he lived very differently than his brother, he has a similar problem. You see, in the story of the two sons, as I said, while they live it very differently, they have a similar problem. That both of them have not yet come to understand the heart of the Father. They have not come to understand yet the heart of their Father. And so with that, haven't yet claimed the identity as beloved sons. And with that, both of them are essentially focused on, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? That they're not focusing on turning towards the Father and receiving his love and his heart and allowing that to transform their own hearts. No, instead they're just focused on themselves. What's in it for me? The Father is only as good as he helps me to my own ends. Again, both sons lived this out in seemingly opposite ways, but they both have that problem. Precisely, Jesus Christ says again and again, the reason he came into the world was to draw us back to the Father. Jesus is the faithful son, who doesn't appear in this parable, but who's essentially the one that reconciles us, the other sons and daughters, to the Father, who reveals to us the heart of the Father, so that it reconciles back to God, and in the process, to each other. Because we see precisely between the two sons, because they don't know the heart of the Father, that they can't reconcile with each other. The older son doesn't know the heart of the Father, and so so doesn't want to come in to celebrate his brother. That's why when Jesus says the greatest commandment, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and the second is like it, love your neighbor. Loving God and loving neighbor are interconnected. Being reconciled to God has the effect of beginning to draw us, reconcile us together. It's part of the nature even just of church. Disparate and varied people, in walks of life, but it's precisely Jesus Christ who draws us together here today, that gathers here today. There may be people in the pews, or if you go to Mass elsewhere, in those pews, who maybe you wouldn't seek out to hang out with or spend any time with. And yet, we're drawn together as a family, as a body of Christ, precisely by Christ, who reconciles us to the Father. Now, I want to spend a little more time with this second son, the older son, who stays with the Father, but again, doesn't quite understand him. Because while we may have ourselves have had moments of life of wandering and being reconciled again, which is beautiful, many of us may find ourselves in that second place. We're here, we're in the Father's house, we're doing the churchy thing, the Christian thing, but is there something in us that we still are resistant to the heart of the Father? I want to share with you from my own life an example of this. When I was studying to to be ordained, and I was preparing for my deacon ordination, which we receive before we're ordained priests, I was on a retreat preparing for that. While I was on this retreat preparing for my ordination to the diaconate, my spiritual director, towards the end of the retreat, he invited me to do a certain prayer of praying the Stations of the Cross. And I may have shared this before. But he invited me to pray the Stations of the Cross in a way as this sort of prayerful meditation over my whole life. How? He said, in each station, you are Jesus. You are Jesus. So, Jesus is condemned to death, the first station. When have been those moments in my life when I have felt condemned unjustly, when I felt rejected, betrayed? And to pray about those moments, to talk to the Lord about those moments. Or, Jesus falls the first time. When have been those moments when my own crosses felt too heavy to bear, when I've fallen and so on. Jesus meets his mother. Who have been those motherly figures in my life? Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry his cross. Who have been the Simon Cyrenes in my life who've helped me bear my own cross? And so on, all around the stations. I remember I came to the 10th station, where Jesus is stripped of his garments. So I was praying about that. Lord, what do you want me to see here, being stripped of garments? And I very much felt the Lord say to me in prayer, I'm stripping you of your garments. I said, wait, what? What is it you're trying to say here, Lord? And what the Lord revealed to me in that prayer is I realized I had been going through my life that in my whole life I had kind of never really believed that I was good. So I kind of set out to prove to the world and to God and ultimately myself that I am good. That I sort of put on this mask for the world, that I wanted the world to see me as good, so I'm going to put on this armor, this mask, and to show the world I'm good, I'm going to try to do the best to follow all the rules and do the most radically good thing I could think of by studying to become a priest. So to prove to the world that I'm good. Because fundamentally, on the deepest level, somewhere along the line, I'd begun to believe this lie that I was no good. There was this deep-seated sense of shame and rejection. And so God said, now, I want to strip you of those false masks you put on for the world. And I want to speak right into the heart, to that lie that's in the wound at the depths of your heart and soul. You've heard it said that you are no good. But I say to you, you are good. That I stitch goodness into your very being. That I made you. And so you don't need to prove anything anymore. You see, there was this lie that had gone kind of into the core of my being. And Jesus says the truth will set you free. That I had not truly received this identity as God's beloved son. So I felt like I had to prove something. And he said, now we're going to strip it all away. Who are you most fundamentally? I made you. I loved you to existence so that I could love you. And what I made is good. Jesus came to free us with the truth of the gospel and who he is. For me personally, it was this moment of profound healing. But it's exactly that I realized I was like that second son, the older son. Sure, I'm in my Father's house, but I didn't really believe that the Father loved me. I didn't really believe that he ultimately cared for my good. That I had to somehow earn my place and work for my good and prove that I was worthy of being loved. And in that moment, God said, it's time to strip that all away. That the heart of God the Father was revealed more deeply. So, brothers and sisters, what are some of the lies that have creeped into your own heart? What is it that God the Father wants to strip away? What is the truth he wants to speak into the depths of your heart and soul to set you free? To be drawn into his life, into what he calls you to be, his beloved sons and daughters. To be reconciled to the Father. To know his heart. To turn away from ourselves and look out towards him. To his heart. Christ came to reconcile us to the Father. This parable we hear today is often called the parable of the prodigal son. Prodigal referring to his excessive wastefulness. He's just pouring out of all the things, the squandering of his property. The son who took his inheritance from his father, essentially telling his father,